When considering ancient Egyptian history in its totality, the Amarna period is a minor 50-year blip and it disappears. And for a long time, we didn't know a lot about it because with the end of the Amarna, what we saw was a immediate return to the past, or a return to normal or tradition. Akhenaten, when he closed all of those temples, made a lot of people upset. People who for thousands of years, thousands of generations, had been worshiping at these temples. Their entire mindset they were told was wrong. The priests and priestess who had dedicated their lives are now out of a job. They are now seen as illegal and heretics if they were to practice their faith. When Akhenaten dies, people, government officials, and priests and priestesses will take advantage of the power vacuum left behind. Power vacuum? What about Nefertiti? We don't really know what happened to her. In terms of the historical record that has been preserved, she kind of disappears a little bit before the death of Akhenaten. We don't know if she died or she takes a step back, or maybe she assumes a different role and is then referred to by a different name. In his place, when he dies of natural causes, can't remember off the top of my head how, but he has a young son, not by Nefertiti, by a minor wife, and this young son is going to take charge. But he is young and he's impressionable. He's 18 years old, and he immediately has the advisors come in and reinstate the traditional religious practices. And it is this young man who we're going to look at next. Gasp! Yes, it's Tut! Tutankhamun! Tutankhaten! What? Miss Cortez, are you stuttering? No! He was born Tutankhaten, in the living image of Aten, because he was the son of Akhenaten. However, when his dad dies, he understands that it is politically wise of him to return to the traditions. So he reverts back to the traditional Egyptian religion, and he changes his name. He changes his name, removing Aten, and he goes by King Tutankhamun, in the image of Amun, as in Amun-Re, that major sun god, the primary god of Thebes. He moves the capital back down to Thebes, and then he died. What? We're going to talk about King Tut, but not because he had a long life, not because he had a great reign, not because he was an amazing leader or a bad leader. He is not a big deal. Why? Well, he took over at the age of 8, and he had a regent. Now, in terms of this power vacuum, I said, this power vacuum takes place between the age of 8 and when he comes of age at 18. And we are not sure who's in charge, but they are systematically reverting everything back to the traditional ways. When he takes his role as king at 18 is when he officially takes charge of Egypt and then swiftly dies. So he didn't have a lot of time to do anything. Why do we talk about him? Because his tomb is remarkable. Not because he is remarkable, but because his tomb is remarkable. What's so remarkable about it? It wasn't looted. It has never been opened until the 20th century. That is why we know about King Tut. That is why we talk about him. It's not because he was great. It's not because he was awesome. It's not because he was terrible. It's because his tomb is the only one that we have of the royal stature and status, and it gives us a glimpse as to what it might have been like for the great kings before him and after him. This image here is the death mask that was placed on top of his body, and it is probably the most iconic element of Egyptian history or Egyptian art. The son of Akhenaten by a minor wife, he technically ruled from age 8 to 18 and died. He was not murdered. I know it might be cooler or more kind of like a Hollywood story to say that he was murdered or poisoned. No. He died. I'll tell you how he died, what we think happened. The reason he's so famous is because his tomb was found in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter. Here he is. Now, Howard Carter was working for the British government and their kind of hybrid colony status in Egypt, and he had been assigned this territory of rock-cut tombs, and this discovery of King Tut's was almost an accident. It was very well hidden in the canyon. This canyon is referred to as the Valley of the Kings. I'm highlighting it there. It's called the Valley of the Kings because many royal tombs are hidden within the rocks and crevices of this canyon face. And it was only discovered because Howard Carter had ordered his workers to remove a pile of rubble. And then with the removal of the rubble, they accidentally found this fissure that led to the causeway or entrance to the tomb. Here's a picture of the entrance to the tomb. You can see it still had 2 guardians on either side who were armed and ready to be animated. The wall, in hieroglyphs, the wall outlines a curse on any who break into it. And then you can see that in the past, prior to Howard Carter, somebody did find this tomb. Somebody had tried to break in, and then it had been patched up. And this type of evidence of prior break-ins or attempted break-ins, it's not unusual. We see it a lot in these tombs. But whoever the robbers were, they didn't get in. They got caught before and were thwarted. When Howard Carter opened the tomb, this is what he found. He found several storerooms and preserved within this treasure trove of objects. The basic shape of the chamber of the tomb are 3 chambers. There is the main chamber we were standing in front of before, and it's called the antechamber. And this antechamber has chariot wheels, a chariot. He has some thrones here. He has walking sticks and food and anything and everything that would be necessary for him to occupy himself. Then there were 2 more statues guarding the entrance to the burial chamber where his body was laid to rest, under layers and layers of these elaborate casements called sarcophagi. We'll get to it, don't worry. I'm giving you lots of words, but I'll define them with you. And then connected to the burial chamber was the treasury. And it's within here that we see the more elaborate treasures that would be befitting a royal. In terms of its size, 3 rooms, maybe you can count that as 3.5 rooms. 3.5 rooms is pretty minimal. And most likely, because King Tut died rather sudden as a young man, this was not his original burial or intended burial space, but it might have been available and ready, and they wanted to quickly put him into a tomb so that he could rise to the heavens. And so this most likely was not carved out for him, but was used for him. There's Howard Carter and opening of the mummy casement. One of the reasons why we talk about King Tut is because not only was his tomb not looted, but his body was not desecrated. Sadly, many of the tombs of these burial sites, not only were the treasures taken, but the bodies were destroyed intentionally. It's not unusual to have the mummified remains being bashed or ripped apart horrifically. There were so many of these mummies that were being exposed that oftentimes they would be left out in the desert and just blanched out or used as like firewood. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. So not only does King Tut's tomb offer us a glimpse at what a tomb for a royal would look like, but also it helps us understand the mummification process, which we're gonna get to next. I know I've been teasing it this entire week. Here's my slide to outline the basic steps of ancient Egyptian mummification. Step 1 is embalming the body. Removing of the organs comes next. And then the body would be, oh, that's a typo. That's step 3. The body is covered in this extreme salt powder. It's called natron, and it would dry out the body, and the body would be left for about 40 days. And then the next step, the body would be given these elements to amulets, that's what I'm trying to say. Amulets for protection. It would then be dressed in oils that had antimicrobial properties to help keep the skin supple and not discolored or disintegrate with mold or mildew. And then the final step would to stuff the body to make it more lifelike. This process, I'm going to give you a video beneath this clip, or I'm going to give you a video to watch beneath this video in your Canvas site, which has a little bit more specifics to it. But this process, this 5-step process, many art historians, or sorry, many Egyptologists, specifically Egyptologists, argue that this mummification process is based on the fact that the Ka is supposed to come down and it should be able to identify the body, or else it will be lost. So to destroy the body is to destroy the vessel in which the Ka can inhabit. The painted images on the sides of the walls are all meant to be recognizable to the Ka. The body should also be recognizable to the Ka. So the preservation and then the filling in of the figure to make it more lifelike, it directly aligns with the principles of life and the Ka and the everlasting or the eternity of your occupation in this temple. This 5-step process also comes with a price tag. Ugh, as always, right? That's how it always is. Depending on how much money you have and your status within the society, within the Egyptian society, you have one of 3 options for your mummification. If you're so lucky to even get mummified, you might just be bundled up into a bag and then dug into a shallow, hot grave in the sand, which happens. We do have those bodies as well. But there are 3 levels. Let's call it the silver, the gold, and the diamond, or no, platinum. Silver, gold, and platinum. So the platinum level is what we're looking at here. Platinum level is all 5 steps, beautifully conducted by the highest priest. This is something that the royals and nobility and high-ranking officials would have, the platinum. The gold, a little bit less time in the salt, maybe a few less rituals of blessing on the body, maybe a few cheaper oils used, not as expensive. And then the silver, I laugh because the silver is quite common. If you want to be mummified, but you don't have the means or the status to have such an elaborate process, quick quick and dirty mummification is they would take your dead body and take a mixture of the natron and water, that salt and water mixture, and they'd shove it up your butt, squeeze it in, and dissolve all of your internal organs, and then flush them all out, and then wrap you up. I know. What happens after you're, stuffed and ready to go? Again, depending on your price tag, your body would be wrapped in various fine linens or not so fine linens and placed with amulets, and then the wrappings would continue around the body into these beautiful intricate braids, and then finally wrapped in rougher linen and then decorated and painted with emblems and prayers. Whew! All right, so let's go to King Tut. King Tut obviously gets the platinum plan for his embalming. And so what we can appreciate is not only understandings of the rituals of burying the dead and burying the royal, but also we have this almost perfectly preserved or very well preserved body that we're going to put under analysis. The innermost coffin is what we're looking at here, and it's your next artwork. So it's this one right here. This lined one right there, that's this one. And inside of that is then the final wrapped body of King Tut. This innermost coffin of his is made of, it weighs 1/4 ton. It's 1/4 ton of gold. The front is further decorated with the precious blue stone called lapis lazuli, and then other stones are also embedded within it. It's gold because gold has the remarkable talent of not tarnishing, unlike other metals like silver. Also, if we think about the role of the Pharaoh is seen as a god here on earth, and the Pharaoh rises to the heavens on the sun's rays, and Tutankhamun, Amun-Re, is a sun god, and so the gold is like the golden light of the sun. It's as if this is a vibrating energy of his divine spirit just buzzing in this sarcophagus. When we open the lid, that's where we're going to see the final death mask. It's right here. Now this was placed on the shoulders of the wrapped body. So his head is behind this head, and then the Nemes comes down and rests on the mummified, padded shoulders of King Tut's body. And what we see is a back to traditional expression of the god, of the king. We have our Nemes with the plating or the stripes going down the chest. His facial structure, he's not quite what we see in the Amarna period, right? The exaggeration like his dad. It's still a little stylized, but it's definitely more along the lines of what we saw in something like Menkaure and Khafre. He does have the vulture and the cobra for protection. His ears have holes. There were no earrings here. We don't know why the earrings weren't placed in there. We don't know if this was an oversight or there's specific symbolism to why that happened. There's his braided lapis lazuli ceremonial beard and a similar kind of chest piece that we saw with Nefertiti's portrait bust. His skin is gold because, again, he is Tutankhamun, Amun-Re, god of the sun. So he's got this golden light of the sun coming through. I told you that his body is fairly well preserved. Because of that, it was put through a CT scan And here we are looking at the actual body of Tutankhamun. And it was put through the CT scan as a way to not only understand mummification, but specifically how he died, because there were so many different rumors and assumptions as to his death. Why did he die at such a young age? So forensic scientists worked out that he had some kind of a break in his leg previous to death. He most likely had some accident. There are references to him being in a chariot accident with his leg being broken. Most likely what happened is that his leg was broken and then it got infected, and the infection became gangrenous, and basically he died of septicemia, bacteria in his blood. And so the evidence points to that with the CT scan of his body. What's also interesting is that the CT scan gave us a better understanding of his physical stature and anatomy. And using the data from the CT scan, we have come up with a 3D computer image and of King Tut. Here he is. I don't know what to tell you. If you were hoping he was some kind of, Egyptian hunk, it shows from analysis of his musculature and his skull that he had a weak chin, a very small chin, a heavy overbite, and a misshapen head. A lot of these probably are characteristic of hundreds of years of inbreeding. And this specific piece here was constructed by a physical anthropologist and forensic artist in France. She's famous for recreating based on very minimal evidence, physical evidence like a skull. She's famous for being able to very accurately recreate the muscular planing of a figure. So she was given anonymously, or not anonymously, she was given this CT scan, and they didn't give her any information. They didn't want her to be biased. And she came up with this image and modeled it into latex. This is very cool. It became a problem when National Geographic put it on the cover. Why? Because this image is remarkably light-skinned, very white. And to call it the new face of King Tut on the cover, many argued whitewashed this ancient Egyptian, ancient African empire as being more European. Now, in defense of the woman who created this, she did not know this was an Egyptian. She's from France, so she just applied skin tone. She was not given a DNA record of what his skin tone would have looked like. Instead, she was making assumptions of skin tone, of eye color, but the planing of the face is what was specific to King Tut, not the skin tone. National Geographic, within the article, they do explain that further, but they don't say it here. And so because of that immediate cover, magazine cover, just saying this is King Tut, they came under a lot of heat for that. The CT scan also allowed us to do this larger body reconstruction, and what we found, again, not that Egyptian hunk you were hoping for. He had a kind of a pigeon chest, misshapen ribs. His hips were displaced, and he had a clubbed foot. These are elements of inbreeding. Yeah. It does make sense, though, that he had, I think, like over 20, or at least 10 canes in his tomb. So he had canes because he had a club foot to walk. This was our king. All right. More breaking news before I say goodbye. Art historians, or I should say Egyptologists, have suggested that this tomb may have been originally used to house Nefertiti. The 3 chambers that make up King Tut's tomb cover 2 secret doorways where they believe there are open voids, which might be more rooms, and stashed within those rooms might be the long lost Nefertiti. I hate to tell you this too, but we don't know. And one of the reasons is because Egyptologists are crazy and they love to fight, like literally physically fight. With the discovery of Nefertiti's, or the proposal that Nefertiti's tomb is behind King Tut's, 2 major archaeologists went head to head in fighting to gain access and then find or publish their discoveries about the site, and using various non-invasive technologies to measure out what they think might be back there. And then when they presented their findings on stage in front of people at a conference, they got into a fist fight. So I don't know what the most recent update is on this finding. I don't think they have found it to be Nefertiti's tomb, but if you want to be an Egyptologist, you gotta also be a boxer. Okay? All right. I'll see you next week and have a great weekend. Bye.